Have you ever wondered why so many women over 60 quietly feel their spark fading? Most believe it is simply menopause or hormones shutting down their desire. But the truth is far more surprising. In most cases, it is not menopause itself that steals intimacy. It is 5 subtle mistakes that women make, without realizing, mistakes that slowly dry out the body, dull sensitivity, and convince you that your spark has vanished forever. I am Dr. Perriera, a gynecologist with more than 30 years of experience guiding women through menopause and beyond. Over those decades, I have cared for thousands of women who whispered the same painful fear: maybe they were too old, too broken, or too far gone to ever feel desire again. And every time I told them the same thing: you are not broken. You are evolving. Once you understand the changes, you can bring back sensitivity, rebuild confidence, and feel truly alive again. Here is the paradox. Most people believe that intimacy naturally disappears with age. But in truth, it is often 5 everyday mistakes, habits that seem harmless, that create the real damage. That is why today I am going to reveal these 5 mistakes, explain the hidden science behind them, and show you simple, doctor-approved solutions that can restore your confidence and vitality at any age. And please stay with me until the end, because the 5th mistake is the most devastating one of all. It is the one I never want to see happen to you. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another honest, science-based conversation about women's health after 60. And let's make this interactive. If you believe intimacy still matters after menopause, type 1 in the comments. If you are unsure, type 0. By the time we finish, you may see this part of your life in a completely new light. Now let's begin with the first mistake. It is the most common concern women share with me after menopause, expecting their bodies to respond instantly, just like they did in their 20s. This single expectation creates unnecessary shame and frustration, and it is where so many women begin to lose hope. Mistake number 1 is expecting instant arousal the way you once experienced it in your 20s. I hear this whispered in my office again and again. Women tell me I used to just think about intimacy, and my body was ready. Now nothing happens right away. I feel broken. Those words carry so much pain, because the truth is, your body is not broken. It is simply changing. And change does not mean failure. After menopause, when estrogen levels decline, the tissues of the vagina and vulva lose some of the elasticity and natural lubrication they once had. Blood flow takes longer to reach the pelvic region. The nerves that once lit up instantly now need more warmth and patience before they respond. What used to take 2 minutes at 25 may take 15 or 20 minutes at 60. This is not decline, it is a new rhythm. The real harm comes when women still measure their response with the stopwatch of youth. When the body does not react instantly, they feel ashamed. I remember a woman named Grace, a retired teacher in her 50s, who told me she and her husband had stopped being intimate. She said she could no longer perform, as if intimacy were a stage play, and she had forgotten her lines. I held her hand and explained that her body was not failing, it was inviting her to slow down. When she and her husband let go of rushing and instead focused on touch, breath, and presence, her desire returned. Not as lightning, but as slow rolling waves that felt deeper and more connected than anything she remembered from youth. This is the lesson I want you to carry. Arousal after menopause is not about speed. It is about presence. When you expect your body to perform on command, you create frustration and self-criticism. But when you accept its new pace, you open the door to a form of intimacy that is richer, slower, and far more soulful. And once you learn to accept this new rhythm, another challenge often appears. It is not about rushing, but about the way many women use self-pleasure. For some, it shifts from being an act of connection into an escape. Mistake number 2 is using self-pleasure to escape rather than to connect. I see this pattern often, especially in women over 50. Late at night, after a long day of responsibilities, stress or loneliness, many reach for their own bodies, not out of genuine desire, but as a way to distract themselves from emptiness or to fall asleep faster. On the surface, it seems harmless. After all, orgasm releases chemicals that calm and soothe. But here is the hidden danger. When self-touch becomes mechanical and disconnected, it loses its meaning. Instead of restoring confidence, it leaves many women feeling emptier than before. I think of Helena, a widow in her 50s, who told me she could climax, but afterward she felt sadness rather than satisfaction. As we talked, it became clear she was not reconnecting with her body, she was using it to mask her loneliness. Each time she touched herself, it was quick routine and empty of presence. The release was real, but the deeper need for tenderness and connection remained unmet. This is why intention matters. The next time you reach for yourself, pause and ask, what am I truly feeling right now? Am I anxious, lonely, or am I genuinely curious to reconnect with my body? That moment of honesty can transform the experience. Light a candle, take a deep breath, and invite your mind into the moment before your body follows. When self-pleasure is practiced with attention, it becomes nourishment instead of escape. Helena learned this. She slowed down, allowed herself to feel, and eventually told me I no longer feel empty. I feel like I found a piece of myself again. That is the power of using touch as connection rather than avoidance. And yet some women make the opposite mistake. Instead of using self-pleasure mechanically, they abandon it altogether. That decision, though it may seem harmless, carries consequences more serious than most realize. Mistake number 3 is stopping altogether. I hear it often in quiet, embarrassed tones, women admitting they haven't touched themselves in years. Some say they no longer feel desire. Others believe it's inappropriate at their age. And many have absorbed the message whispered by society that intimacy should simply end after menopause. But here is the truth. When you stop touching yourself completely, you don't just lose intimacy, you lose health. Your intimate tissues are living structures. They thrive on circulation and gentle stimulation. Without it, blood flow slows, collagen breaks down, and sensitivity fades. Over time, dryness, fragility, and even pain become common. I remember Amy, a woman in her late 50s, who came to me 2 years after her divorce. She hadn't been with a partner, and she hadn't been with herself either. She thought it didn't matter anymore. But now she was struggling with burning and discomfort that made even routine exams difficult. When I explained that her body wasn't betraying her, but simply reacting to disuse, she felt both relieved and surprised. I encouraged her to begin again slowly, just a few minutes a week, with gentle touch and plenty of water-based lubricant, not as performance, but as self-care. Within weeks, her tissues softened, her comfort returned, and perhaps most importantly, she began to feel like herself again. She looked at me one day and said I didn't realize how alive I could still feel. This is why avoiding touch is not protection, it is neglect. When you abandon this part of yourself, you accelerate the very changes you fear. But swinging to the opposite extreme carries its own risks. Some women rely too heavily on high-intensity devices, and over time their bodies become dependent on stimulation that is louder and faster than nature intended. Mistake number 4 is overusing high-intensity vibrators. At first, these devices can feel like the perfect solution. They provide quick results when patience feels difficult. But the nervous system is highly adaptable. When exposed to extreme stimulation again and again, it begins to recalibrate. The brain learns to expect fireworks, and the softer touch of hands or a partner begins to feel dull in comparison. I think of Diane, a woman in her early 60s, who came to me in tears. For 2 years, she had relied on a powerful device almost every night. At first, it seemed like the answer. But gradually she realized that nothing else stirred her, not her own touch, not her partner's. She told me, her voice breaking, "It's like I pressed mute on my body. I can't feel anything unless it's at the highest speed." Her words were heartbreaking but not uncommon. I encouraged her to take a break, to give her body time to reset. It wasn't easy. At first she felt frustrated, even impatient. But as she slowed down, reintroduced gentle touch, and brought her imagination into the experience, something shifted. Weeks later, she told me, "I didn't think it was possible, but I can feel again, not just with my body, but with my heart." That is the gift of stepping back from overstimulation. It reminds you that intimacy doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes the quietest sensations, the brush of fingertips, the warmth of breath, carry the deepest connection. But there is still one mistake left, and it may be the most damaging of all. It has nothing to do with devices or hormones. It lives entirely in the mind. Mistake number 5 is believing you are too old, too guilty, or too far past your prime to deserve desire. Out of all the fears women have shared with me, this is the most heartbreaking. It's not about the body, it's about belief. Somewhere along the way, society convinces women that intimacy is reserved for the young, that once you pass a certain age, it becomes inappropriate or selfish to want it. I have heard women whisper, "I think I've outgrown that part of myself," or "it just feels wrong at my age." But nothing could be further from the truth. Desire does not expire. Your body never forgets how to feel, it only waits for permission to awaken again. I think of Nora, a widow in her early 50s, who hadn't touched herself once in the 6 years since her husband passed. She told me she believed that chapter of her life had closed. Beneath her calm words, I could hear the grief of having buried not only her husband, but also her own vitality. With gentle encouragement, I asked her to begin again, not as duty or performance, but as kindness toward herself. She started with small rituals, soft music, a warm bath, a few quiet minutes of touch without expectation. Weeks later, she returned with a smile that told me everything. She said, "I didn't realize how much I missed feeling alive." That single sentence captured the truth so many women need to hear. Carrying guilt about intimacy in later life is a heavy burden, but it is also unnecessary. There is no statute of limitations on pleasure. There is no age at which you suddenly become unworthy of tenderness. In fact, intimacy after menopause is often deeper and more fulfilling than in youth. It becomes less about proving yourself and more about reclaiming yourself. I have cared for women who believed they had become invisible, that no one saw them anymore, that their bodies had faded into silence. Yet the moment they gave themselves permission to touch, to explore, to remember, they realized something revolutionary. Intimacy was never about age. It was always about presence. And presence has no expiration date. So if you have ever thought that you are too old, too guilty, or too far gone for intimacy, I want you to release that belief right now. Replace it with the truth. You are still capable. You are still worthy. You are still alive. And perhaps the bravest step you can take today is to stop asking whether you're allowed and instead simply begin. Now that we have uncovered all 5 mistakes, the question becomes, what do you do next? How do you move forward to not only reclaim desire, but also your confidence, dignity, and sense of self? Let's bring everything together. As we reach the conclusion of this journey, let's pause and reflect on what we have uncovered together. We began by challenging the common belief that menopause itself ends intimacy. What we discovered instead is that 5 hidden mistakes quietly steal desire long before hormones ever could. The first mistake was expecting instant arousal, as if time had stood still. The second was using self-pleasure as an escape rather than as a connection. The third was stopping altogether, abandoning the very touch your body depends on for vitality. The fourth was relying too heavily on high-intensity devices that gradually dull natural sensitivity. And the fifth, and perhaps most heartbreaking, was believing you are too old, too guilty, or too far past your prime to deserve intimacy at all. Each of these mistakes is deeply human. Each comes from silence, shame, or misunderstanding, not from weakness. And none of them mean you are broken. What they reveal is that your body and your spirit are asking for a new kind of attention, a gentler kind of care, and a willingness to see intimacy not as performance, but as presence. I have sat with teachers, nurses, mothers, widows, women from every walk of life who thought their spark had gone out forever. Yet when they allowed themselves to slow down, to breathe, to rediscover their own bodies with kindness, they found that desire had not disappeared at all. It had only been waiting for permission to return. So here is my invitation for you tonight. Create a small ritual for yourself. Light a candle. Breathe deeply. Place your hand over your heart before you place it anywhere else. Give yourself 5 quiet minutes with no pressure and no goal, just to listen to what stirs inside you. Because intimacy after menopause is not about age. It is about reclaiming your right to feel alive. You are not late. You are right on time. And before we close, let me remind you this video is for educational purposes only. It does not replace medical advice. Every woman's body is unique. If you are experiencing pain, significant changes, or have personal concerns, please consult with your healthcare provider. Your well-being deserves personalized care. If this message spoke to you, let me know in the comments. Share one belief you are ready to let go of, or one small ritual you want to begin. And if you found hope in this conversation, subscribe and share it with another woman who deserves to hear she is not broken, she is evolving. Now tell me, what does intimacy mean to you today in this stage of life?